In your working folder, you will find a document called mandala.ai. Go ahead and open that thing up. We're going to have a frank discussion on layers. You can be frank in this discussion if you want to. Layers, to me, are a very important part of working and controlling anything in an object-oriented program. But they're not as important as, say, a program like, say, Photoshop. Do you ever work in Photoshop? Now, in Photoshop, it's kind of like paint on a canvas, isn't it? So you're painting on something. Now, you do have an undo. But think in the real world, paint on a canvas. And I work in oils and watercolors, and I might work on something for a couple of days. And then I decide I want to add some major element, like a big tree or something in my landscape. There was a painter on PBS by the name of Bob Ross. He used to teach people how to paint. He used to call that your bravery test, because after working all this time on this painting, you're going to add this element. And if you make a mistake, there's not really a whole lot you can do about it. Now, we have undo, but we also have layers. So in Photoshop, being a raster-based program, paint on canvas, I would create a new layer. And then I would put that element in the layer, and if I didn't like it, I could remove the layer. I mean, that's a nice thing. But in Photoshop, because of that paint on canvas kind of effect, layers are like indispensable. You really couldn't work in Photoshop without layers. Now, in Illustrator, we're talking object-oriented. So each item kind of stands on its own. And although it's important to have them, they're not as indispensable, but yet I wouldn't want to do without them. In Illustrator primarily, but not the only thing. Layers are for control. Now, in this one right here called mandala, and mandalas are actually Indian artwork that they use in meditation to concentrate, and I will admit that it took a lot of concentration to make this thing. But over here, let me move over into layers. Let me pull that out so you can see them. Most of you have been here before. I do have 4 layers. Now, each one of the layers contains elements of this complex drawing, like flowers. And if I turn that on and off, indeed the flowers, the leaves, my pretties over here, and then the backdrop right here. They control each part of the layer. Have you ever done this? You're going to work on one of these flowers, but you wind up selecting the wrong thing. I hate it when that happens. So one of the things about control is if I want to do this, I can turn off show hide everything but what I want to work on. So I can now come over here and I can work on this piece. I can play around with it. The time comes eventually maybe that I want to actually move a piece, but I need to see everything else so I can relate it. So maybe I turn everything back on again. And then I have the problem again of maybe selecting the wrong thing and I'm trying to move this. So I can come over here and I can actually lock the layers by clicking here. The little lock's very visual. And that means the only thing I can select is this. So I now have the best of both worlds. I can see things to organize and arrange, and yet the only thing I can move is the thing that's unlocked. Now let me go ahead and reopen those right here. Layers have a stacking order, and so do the layers panel itself. As a matter of fact, well, let me turn these off for a second. If I move this flower over here, you will notice there is a stacking order. Okay, this flower is on top of that flower. If I go to the word object arrange and change the stacking order of that one flower, like say send it to the back, it's still in the back of that layer, not in the back of the layers panel. Let me go ahead and undo that. So our first stacking order is controlled by the layer itself. The second stacking order is controlled by the layers panel. For example, let me turn everything back on again. If I decide I want to move an entire layer, I will be changing its stacking order. It's like an elevator. So if I go to backdrop and click on it and drag it up, see that little line? Okay, that line represents which floor you're about to get off on. And if I put us on the top floor, everybody out, of course everything is going to go away because that layer contains a lot of stuff. So the stacking order and the control, and we're just getting started, this is just a basic lesson, are some of the things that are very important about working with layers. But tell you what, let's dig a little bit deeper.